Hello everyone, you're watching Ukraine Breaking News. My name is Maria Kahal and today we're talking to Stephen Moore, who is former Republican Chief of Staff in US Congress and also a founder of Ukraine Freedom Project. Hello Stephen, it's nice to see you here today, and I would like to start from politics, of course, because on 5th of November there will be elections in the United States, and on 20th of November Biden will be 82 years old, and it is his last term, and I guess last term, like, totally. And he is in a very respectable age, and I would like to summarize with you this term.
Yeah.
Specifically towards Ukraine, like his policy towards Ukraine.
Well, I've been here since day 5 of the war, and I came here on day 5 to help. So I've watched this all unfold, and I've watched it with an eye to U.S. foreign policy because I used to work in Congress, and I've been involved in Republican politics all my life. And so, I think we saw initially Biden's attitude, which has been displayed throughout his term, which is initially he said, "Hey, President Zelensky, do you need a ride out of town?" And Zelensky famously said, "I need ammunition, not transportation." And I think that set the tone for the Biden administration's response, because you can't have President Zelensky saying that and then not be supportive of that. So I think Zelensky was masterful in saying that and responding to Biden like that. Unfortunately, Biden's initial offer to Zelensky illustrates the way he's been going the rest of the time, because they have something called managed escalation. They're managing escalation in Ukraine, and which means they're managing Ukraine's escalation, but they're not managing Russia's escalation, because managed escalation now has almost 3 nuclear powers fighting against Ukraine. You've got Russia, you've got North Korea, and you've got the almost nuclear power of Iran. So if managed escalation means, attracting additional nuclear powers as belligerents, then that's what Biden's policy has done. And we've seen he's slow-walked weapons. It took 10 months to get tanks to Ukraine. In January of 2023, F-16s were a bad idea. In May, they were a good idea. It took them a long time to get here. And I get it, these are complicated weapon systems, but this is something that we're seeing regardless of how complicated the weapon system is.
So who will be the better candidate of them two that we have now, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump? Because last year we talked about Nikki Haley being a possible candidate.
Nice.
Yes, which would be nice, but now we have Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So what can you say about that?
Well, Maria, I'm voting for you.
Thank you.
Listen, you have 2 candidates here who both have vastly different ways of looking at Ukraine. Neither of them, I think, are the ways that they need to look at Ukraine. And if you look at Harris, then I think we can expect more of the same, which is a slow drip of weapons and a very cautious attitude towards a lot of deference to Russia, and a lack of recognition that we are in a global war. We're in a global war because China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are all working together to cause shooting wars in the Middle East, in Ukraine, and an information war elsewhere. So I think you're going to see a lot of the same come out of a Harris administration. And with the Trump administration, the people he's listening to right now are not good voices for a responsible foreign policy that leads to global stability. And so with Trump, he says he can solve the war in 24 hours. But, in 2016, he said he could build the wall with Mexico and make Mexico pay for it. To the best of my knowledge, the wall is not there, and Mexico has yet to send a peso. So I think with Trump, what you might see is some sort of compulsion of a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine, which Putin will break. Putin is currently in violation of hundreds of international agreements and treaties and ceasefires, peace agreements, with dozens of nations, including the United States of America. So at the point at which Putin breaks any potential peace agreement, I view Trump as getting very personally engaged because he will feel betrayed. He will feel humiliated. and at which point I think that we might see a major escalation of the war.
So is this a bad thing or a good thing that Trump can solve a war with some negotiations, something like that? Yes, it may be broken by Putin, but is it a good thing or a bad thing? So do we need like a president of United States that can end a war on a bad terms for Ukraine, somehow bad, or a candidate who will be even weaker than President Biden towards Ukraine, of course?
Well, here's the way I view it, is if we have a peace deal right now between Russia and Ukraine, that gives both sides time. And for Russia, Russia doesn't really build anything, And my friends in the United States, I can go back to my house in the United States. I can look at the bottom of stuff, and there's nothing that says made in Russia on it. So Russia does not build things. Russia digs things out of the ground, like oil and gas and gold, and they make weapons. The AK-47 is the most prolific weapon of mass destruction in history. So Putin is spending somewhere between 10 and 15%, depending on how you look at it, of his GDP on war. It's not like he's going to go back to making refrigerators. He's set up for war. He's building tanks. He's building drones. He's building weapons, and he's going to use those someplace at some point. So, if we're going to be serious about if Ukraine is going to give up 17% of its territory in Luhansk and Donetsk and other places, and the millions of people who are suffering there, they need to get something out of it. And it's not just like a moral thing, and it is a smart thing, because what needs to happen is Ukraine needs to get tons of weapons. Ukraine either needs to get peacekeeping troops, like real peacekeeping troops, not like Ghana or someplace like that. They need real peacekeeping troops, or else this is all going to happen again very quickly, and it's not going to work out for Ukraine.
So who from these two candidates can give Ukraine a lot of weapons and everything that we need?
I wish I had a good answer to that. I will say that Donald Trump, for all his bluster and everything he's saying right now, in 2017, well, backing up a bit, in 2014, Obama, Poroshenko went to Congress, asked for weapons. Obama sent blankets and helmets and other non-lethal support. In 2017, Donald Trump sent the Javelin missiles that kept Ukraine alive before that first massive tranche of weapons could come from Congress. So I don't know. But I think also what's going to happen is we're in a global war. North Korea's getting very belligerent right now. I just got off the phone with some folks in Taiwan who are preparing for civil defense against China, and they're learning lessons from Ukraine, and Iran is starting a war. I mean, global events will overtake any specific Ukraine policy, and I think that in the next year or two, we're going to see something massive that's going to change the scope of things that we're dealing with here in Ukraine.
So what can we do that for world not to forget about Ukraine because of all of these things happening, like China can invade Taiwan, maybe Iran can invade Israel. He's doing that right now with its missiles and drones and everything, and also tensions in other parts of the world. How can we, what can we do?
Yeah, good question. Well, there's a lot of us, this is what I do every day, is I try to make Americans, particularly conservative Americans, Republicans, Christians in America, I try to make them more aware of what's happening here and try to make them aware of the reason that Ukraine is in their interest, right? Supporting Ukraine is in the American interests. And it's just a matter of getting that information. And I think that Ukraine needs to be stridently bipartisan, because I think a lot of Ukrainians don't understand there is not a world where Ukraine gets what it wants from the United States government through the support of only one party. So regardless of what Trump says, or regardless of, of anything else, Ukraine needs Republican support. And if it doesn't have it, things are getting log jammed. And so Ukraine has had some missteps in that regard recently. And, I've spent the last year and a half working 14-hour days every day, trying to build support in the U.S. Congress among Republicans and among Americans more broadly for Ukraine. And so President Zelensky's last visit to America set some of that back considerably, and there needs to be some repair work.
And also we have a problem amongst Ukrainians that a lot of people don't trust Trump and don't like him, and I don't understand it, because there are some good things, there are some bad things in both candidates, but why they dislike them so much, a lot of Ukrainians, you know? Is it a propaganda, or is it a really meaningful thing, you know?
Well, it's common not to like these two presidential candidates.
Yeah.
You know, Harris and Trump are probably the least popular presidential candidates in the history of America. So, so if Ukrainians don't like Trump or don't like Harris, they're in good company. But you know, Trump is saying things on the campaign trail that that are not what you want to hear if you want global stability or peace in Europe. And so I think that's confusing. But again, here's the glimmer. You know, so we have two options, neither of which are ideal. And I think that once Trump gets in, if he gets in, and you know he sees what's going on, and you know at some point, Putin's interests are going to intersect with American interests, and the America First, the Trump people, are living under the illusion that Ukraine is like Afghanistan. You know, you can leave Afghanistan and the world doesn't collapse. If Russia takes Ukraine, that has implications worldwide. That speeds World War III coming to us, and so I think that you know at some point, again, Putin's interests are going to come up against America's interest, and that's going to be obvious to either candidate that's in office.
I also noticed one thing from last year till this day, I guess, that amongst Americans there is very, very popular now to support Palestinians and Arabs now, and very actively support, very aggressively support. And why is this not a thing with Ukraine? Like, why they care so much for people that they don't even know, like most of them, they don't even know these people. And Ukraine is the democratic country and everything, and they don't care about it. They're like, well, it's fine.
No, and so listen, here's my advice to Ukraine. Get Iran to spend tens of millions of dollars organizing protests and influencing propaganda in America, and then you know on behalf of Ukraine, and then I think that you'll see the result that the Palestinians are getting. But you know, I would say this: what you're seeing on TV with those protests, according to the Biden White House, according to Biden's director of national intelligence, those were funded and organized by the Iranians. So, you know, we hear a lot about Republican propaganda in the United States, but what people aren't talking much about is the Iranians and how they're organizing these protests in favor of Hamas and the Palestinians. And you know, but I will tell you this: what you see on TV, those massive protests, does not reflect American public opinion. If you know, the Harvard University just did a survey a couple of weeks ago, and they asked the question: do you support Israel? Do you support Hamas? And 80% supported Israel. And any way you ask the question, the vast majority of Americans support Israel, with one exception, which gets us back to this sort of like restrictions on Ukraine. They want to place restrictions on the way that Israel is conducting their war in Gaza. So and so there is not widespread support, but there's a slight plurality of Americans who think that America should place restrictions on the way that Israel is conducting its war.
But I see it also amongst the European young people. I'm talking about young people, of course, because I watch social media and everything, and they all support Palestinians. Like, My friend was studying in France, and he was like, it's impossible to say that you support Israel. Like, they will just ignore you completely after these words. And I think like amongst young Americans, it is a thing now.
Well, certainly, if you look at the polling, the people that are less supportive of Israel and more supportive of the Palestinians or Hamas or Hezbollah, they skew younger. And as you point out, it's because of social media. And the Iranians are, again, they're funding propaganda. Every Ukrainian can tell you chapter and verse of Russian propaganda against their country. And but that is happening as well with Iran against Israel.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I also wanted to ask you about how works the electoral system in the United States, because for us Ukrainians it's such a complicated thing, because we have completely different elections. Just all the people come and vote for the candidate, and this candidate who gets the most votes just wins.
Yeah.
So how it works in the United States? Can you explain for Ukrainians?
Yeah. Well, the thing that you're supposing is that it works, and that's arguable. But we've had I don't know, more than 100 presidential elections at this point. Is that true? I don't know. Close to 100 presidential elections probably, and we've survived them all. A lot of them have been pretty crazy, so we'll survive this one. But there is not a national vote in America. There are 50 individual votes in 50 states, and each of those states has a certain number of what's called electoral votes assigned to them based on the percentage of population. And there's 270 electoral votes. Actually, there's 540, but you have to get 270 to win. And so 50% plus one of the votes, so 270 gets you a win. So if you win California, which is the largest state, that's I think 110 electoral votes. Or a small state like Montana might have one or two, and small state in terms of population. So, but the interesting thing that's happened now in America is all the states are polarized. Everyone is polarized. And so, as it turns out, there's only 7 states that matter. And it's Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and a couple of others, Georgia. And so everything is coming down to a few 100,000 voters in these 6 or 7 states. And so Pennsylvania is one of them. And there's an effort right now by the Harris campaign to get voters of Ukrainian and Eastern European heritage. There's tons of Ukrainian, Polish people of Polish descent, people of Ukrainian descent in Pennsylvania, and they're targeting these people based on who's going to help Ukraine. And Vice President Harris is actually putting out some very effective ads in that regard. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a brief foray into it. Who do I think is going to win? Ask me that one.
Who do you think is going to win? I know what you answer.
So this is actually probably going to be one of the closest elections in history. And if I had someone, if someone put a gun to my head and made me put, $50 on this race, I would probably bet on Trump. And here's why. What I'm seeing is that his voters are slightly more motivated. The polling shows right now that the people voting in the early states are Trump voters or Republicans. And there's 2 important issues in America, and that is inflation and illegal immigration. And 39% say inflation is our most important issue, and 36% say inflation, the rising costs of goods. And then everything else is like down in the teens or single digits. The war in Israel is like 6%. And Ukraine is so far off the map that nobody is even polling it. There's not, no one's asking the questions, how important is Ukraine to you? Because they don't get anyone answering that question. So, so it's basically, again, illegal immigration and inflation. And voters say they trust Trump the most on these two issues. So that's kind of hard to get around, And the interesting thing is that he keeps talking about Ukraine, and he keeps saying things about Ukraine that are, on the campaign trail that are kind of weird. But talking about Ukraine at all is not a good message, because what people care about is like, when they go to the store every day, and they're like, oh man, a banana's twice as much as it was last week, or that sort of thing. No one goes to Ukraine every day.
I know, of course, that's not the first thing that people care about. I understand it. I'm not delusional,
Yeah.
But I also think that Trump will win.
Yeah. You think Trump will win?
Yes.
And what makes you say that?
I don't know, the support. Because Kamala Harris is not that much popular, I think. She didn't have much time to be on that level as Trump.
Yeah, and she's not done well in some of these interviews. Like there's just really basic questions. Like someone asked her, what happened during the Biden administration that you would change? What would you do differently going forward with President Biden?
She said like nothing special.
Yeah, no, not much.
Yeah, but Trump knows his audience.
Yeah.
I think it's like, and he's working towards his audience. And Kamala, I think she doesn't know exactly towards whom she needs to move.
Yeah.
It's just in my opinion. I don't know. I'm not an American. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If I say
You're
something.
very politically astute, though.
Yeah, thank you. And I also wanted to ask you about Ukraine Freedom Project. Of course, what did you do this year?
Sat on the beach and drank margaritas.
Great.
No, we were very busy this year. And, when was the last time I saw you? It was last fall, wasn't it? Like this time last year?
I think so.
We should hang out more often.
Yeah.
So
drink margaritas.
Exactly. Go have. Can we do this from from
the beach?
Yeah, and drink a margarita. Even though it's a little bit cold, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
But here's what we did: is so. Last October 3rd, the Russians had a massive victory in the information war. And that victory was when 8 members of the Republican pro-Moscow caucus, I just call them the Moscow caucus, they put a motion to fire the Speaker of the House, the pro-Ukraine Speaker of the House. And they were firing him for his support of a $300 million aid package to Ukraine. And every Democrat joined the 8 members of the Moscow caucus of the Republican Party and ousted Kevin McCarthy, who was the pro-Ukraine speaker, who was being ousted for his support of Ukraine. So that was a huge victory for the Russians. And, and listen, folks who watch U.S. politics or say, well, yeah, but they were just voting for their guy or something, Yeah, there's, they had a problem with McCarthy. So there's a lot of reasons they probably voted for them. None of those reasons because they were looking out for Ukraine. So that was a huge blow to Ukraine. And so we got in Speaker Mike Johnson. And Mike Johnson voted 9 out of 9 times against Ukraine aid as a rank-and-file member of Congress. And, this is a tough problem to solve. And the good news is Johnson, by all accounts, is a good guy, like a good human being. And he looked at the information and did a lot of research, did a lot of facts. And so when when the Speaker gets ousted, and the Speaker of the House gets ousted, that's the top person in the House of Representatives. That's the number 3 most powerful person in America. That has never happened in the history of the United States. And so this was a major problem. So this happened. It took probably Johnson like 2 months to figure out, how to make anything run at all. Then it took another 2 months to figure out how to get any legislation passed at all. And then another 2 months to get something really tough like Ukraine aid passed. So that's where we got that 6 months delay. And so what we did was we helped Johnson figure out that So Johnson is a very devout man. He's a very spiritual man. He was a Baptist activist prior to coming to Congress. And so, what even many Ukrainians may not know is that the Baptists are the third largest Christian denomination in Ukraine after Orthodox and Greek Catholic, and they are being tortured and persecuted, abused, and murdered in places like Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, and they're living through hell under the Russian occupation. And so we were able to help get that message to him and help educate him and other members of Congress on that people like them, Republicans are disproportionately Christian. Probably 50 or 60% of Republicans identify as Protestants, as Christians. And so we were able to get the message to them that that people like them, people who worship God in the way they do, are being tortured and murdered by Russians. So it helped build support for Ukraine by showing them that affinity. That's what we did.
That's all you did?
Oh.
Or maybe you have something else to tell us.
We've managed to get about $3 million worth of aid. We do humanitarian aid as well. We do a lot of non-lethal support to the super brave men and women who are fighting at the front. I just have so much respect and affection for the Ukrainian soldier because everybody who's fighting for Ukraine's freedom right now was doing something else on February 23rd, 2022.
Yeah.
So I want to help those folks. So we try to do a lot of things. We Starlinks, generators, EcoFlows. We're gathering up socks right now, and so.
Do you speak to those soldiers after you take all of this aid?
Yeah. I have a lot of friends at the front. I saw one of them drop by my house last night. It was super cool. Victor Chernyvsky is so he is a hero that no one knows about. Victor came up to me in a co-working facility here in Kyiv and says, "Hi, I'm Victor. I'm an evangelical Christian." First things out of his mouth. It's like, all right, dude. And so he went on to tell me how he was a pastor in Luhansk in 2014, and Victor was taking a group out of Luhansk that included a pregnant woman and a newborn infant, and he was pulled over by the Russians. They took him out of his car and took him to the basement. And, you and I know that's a euphemism for being tortured. And so they tortured him for 25 days, including one day when they were shocking him with an electrical taser, the kind used for self-defense. And there was a Russian Orthodox priest trying to cast demons out of him for being an evangelical Christian. Yeah, that's just mind-blowing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so because Victor told me that, I found other Christians like him that have been abused, and which are, as it turns out, not hard to find. It's really widespread. And I was able to take that message. Me and several others like us. Anna Shvetsova is our chief operating officer. She's probably the Ukrainian that knows the most people working in Congress. She's been to about 110 congressional offices. But we went and we told these folks Victor's story, and it made a difference. So if Victor had not, Victor's very courageous now. He's at the front. He's a drone pilot. But if he had not had the courage to come up to me, a total stranger, some American dude, and tell me this, then then this great message that's been so helpful to Ukraine would not have gotten out.
So you need to hang out more in Kyiv. You will find a lot of interesting people.
Yeah,
you live here.
I live here.
Of course.
Yeah.
But you travel to US and to Kyiv and.
I'm entirely too familiar with the Warsaw airport.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for this interesting interview.
Oh, it's always fun to hang out with you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I liked it too. Thank you very much.
Будь ласка. Дуже дякую.